As you may know, the Joint Aviation Authorities, JAA, and now the European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, has tended to define the Air Transport Pilot's Licence, ATPL, in terms of multi-pilot commercial air transport in large aeroplanes. After all, there is a requirement for the issuance of the ATPL that at least 500 hours of this kind of flight has been experienced. It should not surprise you, therefore, that the aspects of multi-pilot commercial air transport, its regulations, procedures, practices, etc., should form core knowledge for you. That is, the knowledge that you can take from airline to airline and still find relevant. The subject of air law takes a much broader outlook, from single-pilot general aviation in a small single piston-engined aeroplane, through multi-pilot commercial operations in a large multi-jet engined aeroplane, plus all types and operations in between. In operational procedures, however, our focus is commercial and air transport, and generally in large multi-jet engined multi-pilot aeroplanes, operating both domestically and internationally. To this end, we will examine the various aspects of this kind of operation, beginning with the regulatory framework, which of course commences with the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. Part 1 of Annex 6 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation, the Chicago Convention, deals specifically with international commercial air transport in aeroplanes. This document will be our first port of call, as we examine global requirements through the Standards and Recommended Practices, SARPs, agreed by the contracting states. Secondly, as a member of the European Union, we must examine the requirements specified by European Aviation Safety Agency and enacted under Regulation 3922 of 1991. Annex 3 is the applicable document, known colloquially as EU OPS. These regulations came into force on July 16, 2008, and, as you can see, deal with common technical requirements and administrative procedures applicable to commercial transportation by aircraft. OPS 1 is the relevant part, as commercial air transportation, aeroplanes, is our subject of study. Scroll down the document to see its subject areas, that is, subparts A through S. Having discussed the legal framework, which is binding both globally, Annex 6, and community-wide, EU OPS, we will move to the issues surrounding long-range operations, particularly those pertaining to remote areas, oceans, deserts, mountain ranges, etc. Finally, we will examine special operations and their effects on a large multi-jet engined aeroplane, such as ditching, wake turbulence, contaminated runways, etc. To this end, this subject is split into 4 major topic areas, namely global requirements, European requirements, long-range flights, and special procedures and hazards. As we have already seen, ICAO regulates international commercial air transport in aeroplanes through the standards and recommended practices within Part 1 of Annex 6 to the Chicago Convention. For those of you who have not yet completed the Air Law module, this convention, more correctly named the Convention on International Civil Aviation, reflected the views of the nations that agreed to its terms or articles. Hereafter, these nations will be known as the contracting states. The articles of the Convention were supplemented by Annexes 1 through 18, that contain the standards and recommended practices with which the contracting states agree to abide or consider. Standards are mandatory and must be implemented by each contracting state. The state may opt out, however, if it files a difference with ICAO, which explains its alternative method and that this method does not compromise safety. Recommended practices are voluntary. A contracting state may adopt them or not as it sees fit. There is no requirement to file a difference should the state not implement a recommended practice. Annex 6, Part 1 contains, therefore, the mandatory standards and voluntary recommended practices that are applicable to international commercial air transport in aeroplanes. Throughout this course, the regulations will be explained using everyday English. However, in order to be complete, the legal language will be extracted from the relevant documents and displayed on the screen. For example, shown here is the actual wording of Chapter 2, Applicability. Avoid reading this text during the narration, as this will only confuse you. So, let's see what the remainder of the document has to say.